Little girl was cornered by police dogs, screaming for help, until a Hell's Angel stepped in. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get started with today's story. On a cold, overcast afternoon, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a young girl named Lily was out playing near the park. Her bright red jacket stood out against the gray sky, and her laughter echoed in the empty streets as she played with her dog. Lily, only 9 years old, loved the park, but today, something felt different. As she wandered further from home, she didn't realize that danger was closing in. Nearby, an officer was trying to control his 2 police dogs, who were on high alert. A call had come in about a suspect in the area, and the dogs had picked up a scent. Without warning, the dogs broke free from their handler's control and sprinted toward Lily, their growls echoing in the air. Lily froze, her heart racing as the dogs circled her. She stumbled back, her fear turning to panic, but the dogs were too fast. They moved closer, their teeth bared. She screamed for help, her voice cracking in the cold air. The sounds of her desperate cries filled the street, but no one came to her aid. In that moment, Lily felt completely alone. As the dogs closed in, Lily's world seemed to shrink. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the terror, but when she opened them, a dark figure appeared in the distance. The roar of a motorcycle broke through the tension, and Lily's heart skipped a beat. A Hell's Angel biker, dressed in his leather vest and patches, revved his engine as he approached. His Harley-Davidson cut through the air like a thunderstorm, the roar of the engine drowning out the growling of the dogs. Without hesitation, the biker gunned the throttle, speeding toward the scene. The officer shouted at him to stop, but the biker wasn't about to back down. He swerved around the officer and the dogs, getting between them and Lily. With one swift move, the biker dismounted and stepped forward, his powerful frame blocking the dogs from advancing any further. The dogs hesitated, sensing the strength in the biker's stance. The officer, still unsure of what to do, shouted again, but the biker remained calm, his eyes fixed on the dogs. The dogs growled, but they seemed to recognize that their target had shifted. With a few more steps forward, the biker stood tall, intimidating the animals with his presence. "Get back," the biker commanded, his voice low but firm. It wasn't just his size that made the dogs hesitate. There was something in his tone, something that carried authority, and it was enough to make the dogs back off. The officer, still holding his leash tightly, took a step back, his eyes wide in disbelief. The situation had gone from terrifying to surreal in a matter of seconds. Lily, still in shock, stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. But as the biker approached her, kneeling down to her level, something changed. He reached out a gloved hand, offering her comfort. His touch was gentle, not what Lily had expected from a man with such a fearsome reputation. "You're safe now," the biker said quietly, his voice softer than she had anticipated. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fear that had consumed her moments earlier started to fade. She nodded, still trying to process the events that had just unfolded. The biker stood up, turning his attention back to the officer. "You should keep those dogs on a tighter leash," he said calmly, his words cutting through the tension in the air. The officer nodded, still in shock, unable to respond. As the biker walked back to his motorcycle, Lily stood there, her heart still racing, but now, with a sense of safety she hadn't known before. The biker didn't speak another word, but as he revved his engine and sped off into the distance, Lily watched him go, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. She knew that she would never forget the man who had saved her life, and somehow, she knew that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. I did not expect to be sitting in my garage alone that evening. The air outside was still, cold enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, but the night was peaceful. That was until the image of the little girl flashed in my mind again. Lily, her terrified face, the scream she let out when the dogs were about to reach her, still echoed in my head. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't supposed to get involved in something like that. It wasn't my business, but something about her made me stop. I could still see the fear in her eyes when I stepped between her and those dogs, the way she froze when she saw me coming toward her. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of connection with anyone. I was used to being on my own, running with the Hell's Angels, keeping my distance from the world. But that girl, her fear was raw, real, and it triggered something deep inside me. I wasn't prepared for it. I had barely even thought before I revved my engine and went charging in. I didn't know what came over me, but I didn't regret it. I had saved her. That's what mattered. Or was it? Just before I left, I noticed her still standing there, watching me ride away. Her eyes seemed to follow me, a silent thank you that I couldn't shake off. I hadn't done much, just kept the dogs off her. But for some reason, it felt like it was more than just a rescue. It felt like it was the beginning of something else. A week passed. I hadn't seen Lily since that day. I kept myself busy, as usual, riding around town and fixing bikes in the shop. I didn't think much about the little girl until one afternoon. As I was working on a custom Harley, I saw a shadow at the door. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then the door opened a little. There she was, Lily. Her red jacket was the same as the day I saved her, and her face, though still a little scared, had changed. It was like she had gained a little more courage. I stood up from my workbench, wiping my hands with a rag, and she stepped inside. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice soft, but steady. My heart skipped a beat. "Thank me for what?" I asked, trying to play it cool. "For saving me," she replied, looking down at her shoes. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." I could tell she was struggling with her words, but there was something in her eyes that made me feel like she was finally starting to process what had happened. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else, something stronger. "It's no big deal," I said, trying to downplay it. I wasn't used to this kind of attention. "It wasn't just a big deal," she said. "I don't have anyone else who looks out for me. Not like you did." I didn't know how to respond to that. It was like she was opening a door I didn't know existed. A door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. But I couldn't stop myself. "You got a place to stay?" I asked, trying to change the subject. She shook her head. "No, not really. My mom's sick, and we're kind of between places." I could hear the quiet desperation in her voice. The kind of desperation I used to feel when I had nothing, when I was alone. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't my place to get involved, but I couldn't just ignore her. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me," I said, trying to sound casual, but something in my gut told me that this wasn't the end of it. The next few days were a blur. I went about my usual routine, but Lily's face kept popping up in my mind. Her words, the way she looked at me, like I was the only person who could help her. I was no hero, but I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I could do something. It was late one night when I got a call. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end sent chills down my spine. "You helped her, didn't you?" the voice asked, low and threatening. "I'm going to make sure you regret it." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had no idea who it was, but the message was clear. Whoever they were coming after me, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. I knew I had to make a choice. Either I walked away, left Lily to fend for herself, or I stood up and faced whatever was coming. I wasn't a man who backed down, not when it mattered. And this time, it mattered. The next day, I found myself at Lily's house. I didn't tell her what had happened, didn't want to scare her more, but I could see the worry in her eyes when I knocked on the door. She didn't ask questions, just invited me inside. She needed help, and I was the only one who could give it to her. I didn't know what was coming, but I wasn't going to leave her alone in this. I had made a promise to myself that I wouldn't walk away from this fight. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Lily, her words echoing in my head. She didn't have anyone else. No one to help her, no one to protect her. And it wasn't just about the dogs or the officer anymore. Something bigger was lurking. I didn't know who was behind the call, but they clearly knew who I was. I had been in enough fights, seen enough trouble in my life to know when something wasn't right. And this wasn't right. The threat wasn't just about her anymore. It was about both of us. I couldn't walk away from it. Not now. The next morning, I decided to take action. I couldn't wait around for whatever came next. I went straight to Lily's house, determined to make sure she was safe. When I arrived, she was standing by the door, her face still filled with concern, but also a glimmer of relief when she saw me. "You're here," she said softly, her eyes looking up at me with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I didn't know who else to turn to. I nodded. You don't have to worry. I'll make sure you're safe. But we need to figure out who's behind all of this. I could see the tension in her shoulders as she let out a breath, as if she'd been holding it in for a long time. I don't know who they are, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But they've been following me, watching me. They know where I live. I could feel my heart sink. Whoever these people were, they were dangerous, and they weren't going to stop. Do you have anything that could tell us who they are? Anything at all? I asked, my voice steady. She shook her head. I don't think so. I've been trying to keep it all secret. But they've been getting closer. Last night, I heard someone outside my window. That was the breaking point for me. It wasn't just a random threat anymore. This was personal, and I wasn't about to let her go through this alone. We need to leave, I said, my voice firm. Right now? Get your things. We're going to find a safe place for you. Lily's eyes widened, the fear flashing back in an instant, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded and disappeared into her room to grab what little she had left. As she packed her things, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I wasn't sure where we were going, but I knew one thing. She wasn't going to be alone in this. I wasn't going to let anyone harm her. After what felt like hours, Lily came back with a small bag. It was all she had. I'm ready, she said, her voice a little steadier now, but I could tell she was still scared. I led her outside, my bike parked just down the street. The engine roared to life as I kicked it into gear, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't the kind of life I had ever planned for, but in that moment, it felt right. The road stretched out before us, the wind whipping through our hair, and for a brief moment, it felt like nothing else mattered. We rode for hours, stopping only when we reached a small, secluded cabin deep in the woods, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might be looking for us. I parked the bike and turned to Lily, who was looking around, unsure of what to expect. This is our safe place, I said, trying to reassure her. No one knows about it. We'll lay low for a while, figure out what's going on. She nodded but didn't say anything, her mind clearly racing. We unloaded our things, and I set up the small space as best as I could. The cabin wasn't much, but it was hidden, and it was safe. Thank you, Lily said after a long silence, for helping me. I don't know what I would have done without you. I could see the gratitude in her eyes, but there was something else there too. A look of someone who had seen too much too soon. You don't have to thank me, I replied, keeping my tone calm, but inside, my mind was working overtime. I knew we weren't out of danger yet. We still had no idea who was behind all of this or what they wanted. But one thing was certain, they weren't going to stop until they got what they were after. And neither was I. I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. Not again. I'd fought in enough battles in my life, seen enough violence, but I was never more determined than I was now. I would protect Lily, and I would make sure whoever was coming after her would pay. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. I kept watch, scanning the woods, making sure we weren't being followed. But something didn't sit right with me. There was a strange sense of calm before the storm, and I knew that this was just the beginning. I couldn't relax. Not yet. Then, one night, I saw something. In the distance, the faint glow of headlights. Someone was out there, and they weren't looking for a friendly visit. It was time to prepare. I could hear the engine long before I saw the headlights. The soft rumble of an approaching car echoed through the woods, its distant sound cutting through the stillness of the night. My heart started to race, and I instinctively turned to check on Lily, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the cabin, her eyes wide, her expression full of uncertainty. Stay here, I said to her, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. Don't make a sound. She nodded, clutching the small bag she had packed earlier. I could tell she was scared, but I also saw the trust in her eyes. She was counting on me. I moved to the window, carefully peeking through the small gap in the blinds. The headlights were growing brighter, and soon I could make out the shape of the car. It wasn't just any car. It was an old black sedan, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. I couldn't tell who was driving, but I knew this wasn't a coincidence. Whoever they were here for us. I crouched down, making my way to the back door. There was a shed out back, a place I could use to keep an eye on things without being seen. I gestured to Lily to stay put, and she nodded again, her face pale. As I stepped out into the night, the air was cold, biting at my skin, but I didn't feel it. I was focused. Every sound, every movement, I was hyper-aware of. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just about keeping Lily safe anymore. I was in this now, and there was no turning back. The car came to a stop just outside the cabin, its engine shutting off with a soft click. For a moment, everything was silent. I held my breath, waiting, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, the door of the car creaked open, and a figure stepped out. I couldn't see their face, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of experience. I knew right away that this wasn't someone to mess with. They were a professional. My gut twisted. This was the person who had been following us. Whoever they were, they had found us. I stayed low, watching as the figure made their way to the front door of the cabin. They didn't knock, didn't hesitate. They just reached for the door handle and yanked it open. I didn't move. I couldn't. The person stepped inside, and I heard them speak in a low, gravelly voice. "We need to talk." Lily, I knew, was alone inside. She was vulnerable. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. I had no choice but to act. I sprinted towards the cabin, my boots pounding the ground. But before I could reach the door, I heard Lily's voice. "Please, don't hurt me. I don't know what you want." Her voice was shaky, full of fear, and it nearly stopped me in my tracks. But I pushed forward. This wasn't going to end. Well, unless I stopped it. I reached the door just in time to see the figure step closer to Lily, their shadow looming over her. Without thinking, I shoved the door open, charging into the room. "Get away from her!" I shouted, my voice raw with anger. The figure turned, surprised, but not scared. They weren't intimidated by me, not at all. "You must be the biker," they said with a sneer, sizing me up as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I felt my muscles tense, my hands curling into fists. "What do you want with her?" I demanded. The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, they took a step closer to me, clearly trying to intimidate. "It's not her I'm interested in," they finally said, their voice low and dangerous. "It's you. You're the one who's been making this difficult. You should have stayed out of it." "I'll never stay out of it," I replied, stepping closer, refusing to back down. "Not when it comes to her." The figure laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You think you can protect her? You don't even know what you're dealing with." I could see the threat in their eyes, and I knew this wasn't just some random stranger. This was someone connected to something far bigger. I could feel the weight of their words, and I knew they weren't bluffing. I was in over my head, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to back down. "You don't scare me," I said, my voice steady, even though every part of me wanted to run. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me first." The figure seemed to consider this for a moment before finally speaking again. "You'll regret this," they said, and just as quickly as they had entered, they turned and left the cabin, slamming the door behind them. I didn't follow them. I couldn't risk it. Instead, I walked over to Lily, who was sitting on the floor, still shaking. I knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," I said, trying to reassure her, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "They're gone. For now." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Whoever they were going to come back. And when they did, I wasn't going to. Be ready. But I wasn't going to let Lily face it alone. I wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. Not now. Not ever. I didn't waste any time after the figure left. I kept my eyes on the door for a few more seconds, my heart still pounding in my chest, but there was no sound, no movement. Whoever they weren't coming back just yet. I turned to Lily, who was still sitting on the floor, her body trembling, her face pale. "You okay?" I asked, my voice softer now. She nodded slowly, though I could tell the fear hadn't fully left her. "I think so," she whispered, looking up at me with wide eyes. "But I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. Why are they after me?" I didn't have all the answers, and the truth was, I wasn't sure how deep this rabbit hole went. But I couldn't leave her in the dark, not anymore. "I don't know exactly," I said, sitting down beside her. "But I promise you this. I won't let them hurt you. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to keep you safe." She gave me a small, uncertain smile, the kind of smile that made me feel like maybe I could actually protect her from whatever was coming. But I knew we couldn't stay here forever. This cabin wasn't safe anymore. It had served its purpose, but the threat was real, and we needed to move before it was too late. "Pack your things. We're leaving," I told her, standing up and moving toward the back door. You can't stay here. We need to get you somewhere else, somewhere safer. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She knew as well as I did that the danger wasn't over. She gathered her things quickly, barely saying a word. I could see how she was processing everything in her young mind. The confusion, the fear, it was all there. But beneath it, there was something else. Determination. She wasn't going to let this break her. I'll be right outside, I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I stepped out into the cold night air. It felt different now. The quiet was heavier, more oppressive. I didn't know who had been after us, but I was certain they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. It was my job to make sure they didn't get it. I checked the perimeter of the cabin, making sure there was no one hiding in the shadows. It felt like hours passed, but I knew it had only been a few minutes before Lily came outside, her small bag clutched in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes still full of uncertainty, but there was a spark of something else in them now. I'm ready, she said quietly. Let's go. We made our way back to the bike. I could hear the engine purring softly as I revved it, the rumble cutting through the silence. Lily climbed onto the back, wrapping her arms around my waist. It was dark, and the wind was biting, but it felt like freedom. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that we were going to be okay. But I knew better than to think it would be that easy. As we pulled away, I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to the threat that loomed over us. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop. And I wasn't going to stop until I found out who they were and why they were after Lily. We rode through the night, the cold wind stinging my face as the road stretched ahead of us. The world outside the helmet was a blur, but inside, I was clear-headed. I had one job, and that was to get her out of danger. We didn't stop until we reached an old motel about 200 miles from where we started. The place was run down, the kind of place no one would think to look for us. I parked the bike and turned off the engine, glancing over at Lily. She was quiet, her eyes scanning the surroundings, but I could tell she was tired. We'll stay here for a while, I said, giving her a reassuring look. We'll lay low. I'll get us some food, and we can figure out what to do next. She nodded, though I could see the weight of everything in her eyes. Thank you, she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. I don't know what I would do without you. I could tell she meant it, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what I was doing either. I was used to being on my own, used to keeping to myself, but protecting her felt different. I wasn't sure why, but I knew I wasn't going to turn my back on her. We spent the next few days at the motel, keeping to ourselves, trying to keep a low profile. But no matter how many times I checked, no matter how many doors I locked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. Someone was out there, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And then it happened, low and steady. She's not here. I lied. There was a long pause before the man responded. I'm not here to hurt her, he repeated, his voice softer this time, like he was trying to convince me. But I will if I have to. His words sent a chill down my spine. There was no way I was letting him in. You need to leave. Now, I said, more forcefully this time, my hand tightening on the handle. But the man didn't leave. Instead, I heard him move closer, his footsteps slow but deliberate. She doesn't have a choice in this, he said, his voice dark, like he was savoring the power. I know everything about her. Where she's been, where she's going. You can't protect her forever. The air seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. This wasn't just some guy looking to make a deal. This was a threat, and it was very real. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed to get Lily out of there, and fast. I didn't know who this guy was or what he wanted, but one thing was clear. He wasn't leaving without getting what he came for. I turned quickly and walked back to Lily, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, still shaken from earlier. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes wide with concern. What's going on? She asked softly. It's him, I said, my voice tight with urgency. The one who's been after you. He's here, and he's not leaving without a fight. Lily stood up, her small frame tense with fear. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. Not a good one, anyway. My mind raced through the possibilities, but none of them were good. I couldn't stay here. But I couldn't run either, not without a plan. I looked out the window again. The car was still parked outside, and I could see the silhouette of the man standing in front of the door, waiting. I knew I couldn't stay in this motel much longer. We needed to get out of there before things got worse. Get your stuff, I said, My voice calmed despite the rush of panic flooding my veins. We're leaving. Lily hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her bag and moved quickly to the door. I grabbed my jacket and slipped on my boots. We couldn't afford to waste any time. What about him? Lily asked, her voice trembling. We'll deal with him later, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. Right now, we need to get out of here. We moved quickly but quietly toward the back door. I didn't trust the front. The man was still there, waiting. I glanced back at Lily, who was staying close behind me, her steps light but quick. As we reached the back door, I hesitated. Something didn't feel right. It was too quiet. The man had to know we were making a break for it. I turned the knob and pushed the door open just enough to peek outside. The coast was clear. For now, I motioned for Lily to follow me, and we stepped out into the dark, the night air biting at my skin. I kept my eyes scanning the area as we moved quickly, staying low and quiet. We made our way toward the alley behind the motel, hoping we could make it to the motorcycle without being seen. I could feel Lily's presence beside me, her breathing shallow but steady. She was holding it together, but I could tell she was scared. And so was I. The motorcycle was parked just a few feet away, but before I could reach it, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy ones. Coming our way. I turned, my heart pounding. The man had found us. He was coming, and there was nowhere to run. I moved quickly, grabbing Lily's arm and pulling her close to the side of the building. We crouched low, trying to keep out of sight. I knew we couldn't outrun him, but I was damned if I was going to let him take her. Not without a fight. We waited, holding our breath, as the footsteps grew closer. Every muscle in my body was on edge. I wasn't going to make it easy for him, but I wasn't sure what would happen when he found us. All I knew was this. I wasn't going to let him take Lily. Not now, not ever. I could feel the tension building as we crouched behind the building, trying to stay out of sight. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and I could hear the sound of heavy boots crunching against the gravel. Every nerve in my body was on high alert. I held my breath, praying that whoever was following us wouldn't see us. I glanced at Lily, who was huddled close to me, her wide eyes filled with fear. She was trying her best to stay quiet, but I could tell the anxiety was eating at her. I wasn't sure how much longer we could stay hidden. The footsteps stopped suddenly, and for a moment, there was silence. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the sweat on the back of my neck. I strained my ears, trying to hear anything that might give us a clue as to what was happening. Then, the silence was broken by a voice. "I know you're out there," the man said, his voice low but steady. It sent a chill down my spine. "You can't hide forever." I clenched my fists, trying to control my breathing. He knew we were here. The game had changed. "There's nowhere to run," he continued, his tone mocking. "You're cornered. You might as well come out and make this easy." I didn't move. Neither did Lily. We were trapped, but we couldn't give up now. I had to protect her. We couldn't let him win. I could hear him moving closer, his footsteps now slow and deliberate. He was circling the building, searching for us. I had to think fast. "Lily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "When I say run, you go. You don't stop. You head straight for the trees at the end of the lot, and you don't look back. Understand?" She nodded, her face pale but determined. I could see that she trusted me, and that gave me the strength to move forward. I waited, my body coiled like a spring, ready to make a move. The man was almost right next to us now. I could hear his breath, steady and calm, as if he was savoring the moment. He was getting too close. I couldn't wait any longer. "Now!" I shouted, grabbing Lily's hand and pulling her toward the alley. We ran as fast as we could, my heart pounding in my chest as we darted between the buildings. I didn't dare look back. All I could focus on was getting to the trees. I heard the man shout behind us, but I didn't slow down. We had to keep moving. Lily was right behind me, her feet barely touching the ground as we sprinted through the dark night. My mind raced with every step. We couldn't stop. If we did, we were done for. We reached the trees, and I pushed through the thick underbrush, pulling Lily along with me. The sounds of our footsteps echoed in the quiet night, but I kept my pace steady, not daring to slow down. I glanced behind us. There was no sign of the man yet, but I knew he was close. I could feel it in my bones. We had to keep going. We broke through the trees and into the open field, where the dim light from the motel barely illuminated the path ahead. But there was nowhere else to go. We had to keep running. I pushed forward, forcing my legs to move faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Lily was still with me, but I could hear the panic in her breathing now. I could see her struggle to keep up, and my heart ached for her. She was just a kid, and she didn't deserve any of this. I slowed just a little, making sure she was still okay. "You're doing great," I said, trying to reassure her. "Keep going. We're almost there." She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. We had no choice but to keep moving. A few more steps, and I could see the old barn at the edge of the field. It was our only chance. I knew we had to get inside and hide. I pushed Lily ahead of me, urging her to run faster. As we neared the barn, I heard something behind us. Footsteps again, much closer now. The man wasn't giving up. We had no time to waste. "Get inside," I shouted to Lily as we reached the barn doors. She turned to look at me, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "Go." I pushed her gently, and she scrambled inside. I followed close behind, slamming the doors shut behind us. We were inside the barn now, but I knew it wasn't over. I could hear the man's footsteps approaching fast. He had to be right behind us. We weren't safe yet. I took a deep breath and scanned the barn. There were shadows everywhere, and I used that to our advantage. "Stay quiet," I whispered to Lily, who was hiding behind a stack of hay bales. I crouched down beside her, my eyes fixed on the door. We could hear the man moving outside, his footsteps slow, methodical, as he searched for us. I could hear his voice again, muffled by the barn walls. "You can't hide forever," he said, almost casually. "I will find you." My pulse raced, and I fought the urge to move. We had to stay hidden. We had to wait for him to leave. The silence seemed to stretch on forever, but every minute that passed felt like an eternity. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, waiting. My heart was in my throat. I knew the moment had come. I had to make a choice. Do I wait it out? Or do I fight back? I held my breath, waiting, as the sound of footsteps grew fainter. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the sweat on my palms. Was he really leaving, or was this just a trick? I couldn't take the chance of being wrong. Every nerve in my body was on edge. It was quiet, so quiet that I could hear the beating of my own heart in my ears. I didn't dare move. Lily was pressed against the hay, her wide eyes staring at me, silently asking what we should do. I didn't have the answer. The silence stretched on, making me wonder if he had given up, if he had finally walked away. I held my position, my eyes trained on the door. Then, just when I thought the danger had passed, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The unmistakable sound of a car engine revving in the distance. He wasn't leaving. He was coming back. I could feel the panic rising inside me. We didn't have much time. I glanced at Lily, who was still huddled in the corner. "We have to go? Now," I said, my voice low but urgent. I didn't wait for her to respond. I grabbed her hand, pulling her to her feet. We moved quickly, silently, slipping past the stacks of hay and toward the back of the barn. The air outside was crisp, but it felt like freedom. We had to move fast before he realized we were gone. I could hear the engine getting closer, the sound of the tires on gravel echoing in the night. There was no way we could outrun him on foot, and the bike was too far away. Our only option was to get to the tree line, where we could blend into the shadows. We rushed toward the woods, the cold wind biting at my face as I urged Lily to keep up. She was fast, but I could hear the strain in her breathing. She was scared, and I didn't blame her. This wasn't her fight. It was mine. But I wasn't going to let her face it alone. I would protect her, no matter what. We reached the edge of the woods just as the car pulled up to the barn. I pulled Lily down into the underbrush, keeping her low to the ground. I could see the headlights of the car cutting through the darkness, and I could hear the faint sound of the man's footsteps as he got out of the car. I held my breath, praying that we wouldn't be spotted. The man's voice carried through the night. "I know you're out there," he called. "There's nowhere to hide. You're running out of time." His words sent a chill through me. I had no idea who this man was or what he wanted, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to stop. Not until he got what he wanted. I gripped Lily's hand tighter, trying to keep her calm. She was shaking, but I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't giving up. Neither was I. I watched as the man moved toward the barn, his footsteps heavy on the ground. I couldn't let him find us. I had to keep us hidden. We waited in silence. The only sound the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. But the longer we waited, the more I realized that there wasn't much time. If he found us, it would be over. I had to do something. I made a split-second decision. Stay here, I whispered to Lily. I'll distract him. You run to the bike and get out of here. I'll catch up. She looked at me, her eyes wide. With fear. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm not leaving you. I gave her a reassuring look, though inside, I was anything but calm. You have to, I insisted. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. But we need to move fast. Lily hesitated, but finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Be careful. I gave her one last look before slipping out of the cover of the trees. I moved quietly, keeping to the shadows as I made my way toward the barn. The man was still inside, his voice raised as he searched the area. I couldn't let him get any closer to Lily. I picked up a small rock and threw it into the distance, hoping it would create a distraction. The man's head snapped toward the noise, and I saw my opportunity. I ran, low and fast, staying hidden behind the trees as I made my way back toward the bike. My heart was racing, and every part of me wanted to look back, to make sure Lily was okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to get us out of there first. I reached the bike and quickly started the engine, the sound of the motor roaring to life in the quiet night. I looked back toward the woods, hoping Lily would be close behind. And then I saw her. She was running toward me, her face filled with fear and determination. Come on, I shouted, urging her to hurry. She reached the bike, and I pulled her onto it, revving the engine as we sped off into the night. We didn't stop until we were miles away from the motel. The road ahead was dark, but I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. For now, we were safe, but I knew that wouldn't last forever. Whoever that man was, he wasn't going to give up. Neither was I. I didn't stop until we reached the small town of Cedar Ridge, a place I knew would give us a few hours of safety. I didn't trust the motel anymore. I didn't trust the road. I didn't trust anyone. Lily had barely said a word during the ride, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist as we sped through the night. Her silence weighed heavily on me, and I knew that the fear she had felt wasn't just about what we had just escaped. There was more to it. We couldn't stay here long, but we needed a break. I pulled into a small gas station just outside town and parked the bike near the edge of the lot. The sky above was still dark, but there were signs of dawn creeping over the horizon. It was going to be a long day. I could feel the weight of what we'd just gone through settling in. As I took off my helmet, I turned to Lily. She was sitting on the bike, staring straight ahead, her face pale. I could tell she was holding it together, but just barely. We're safe for now, I said, trying to sound reassuring, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. She nodded slowly but didn't respond. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the unspoken words she was trying to keep inside. Lily, I started, but I didn't know what else to say. How do you explain this kind of situation to a kid? I'm sorry you're going through this. I'll keep you safe. I promise. She looked up at me, her expression softening just slightly. I'm not scared of you, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared of what's going to happen next. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't just about the man we had run from. It was about everything. You're not alone in this, I said, my voice steady, though my mind was racing. I'm going to make sure you're okay, but we need to be smart. I could see she was still unsure, but she didn't argue. I walked over to the gas station's small store and picked up some food and water. It wasn't much, but we needed to refuel, both physically and mentally. When I came back, I noticed Lily was standing by the bike, her gaze distant. She wasn't looking at anything in particular, just staring off into the distance. I knew what she was thinking. She was trying to make sense of it all, just like I was. How long do you think we can keep running? She asked, her voice tinged with the fear she was trying to hide. How long before they find us again? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't have an answer. I had no idea how long we could keep running. All I knew was that as long as I was breathing, I was going to protect her. We'll make it work, I said, even though I wasn't sure what that meant. I wasn't sure how long we could hide or how long we could stay one step ahead of the people after us. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stop. Not until she was safe. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The constant awareness that whoever was after us wasn't going to give up. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I knew they were dangerous. The thought of Lily being caught in the crossfire was more than I could bear. We can't stay here long, I said, breaking the silence. We need to keep moving, but we can't keep running forever. We need a plan. Lily turned to me, her expression still filled with uncertainty. Do you have one? She asked, her voice barely audible. I shook my head. Not yet, but I'm working on it. I wasn't sure how to explain it to her. I wasn't sure how to explain it to myself. But I knew that if we didn't come up with something soon, we wouldn't be able to keep running. We needed answers. We needed to know who was after us and why. And we needed to make sure they couldn't get to us again. I looked around, scanning the area. The town of Cedar Ridge was small, quiet, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. It was the perfect place to lay low for a while. But I knew it wouldn't be long before someone started asking questions, and when they did, we'd have to be long gone. I walked back to the bike, taking a deep breath as I mounted it. Lily followed suit, climbing on behind me. We'll figure this out, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I won't let anything happen to you. She nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was enough to keep me going. We weren't safe yet, but we would be. Somehow we would be. I spent the next few days in Cedar Ridge, moving from one rundown motel to the next, trying to keep a low profile. We couldn't stay in one place for too long, not with the man from the motel still out there, and definitely not with the feeling that someone was always watching us. I kept my distance, never venturing out too far, just enough to grab food and supplies for the next leg of our journey. Lily was holding it together, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. The constant moving, the fear, it was starting to wear her down. She still hadn't said much about the past, about what had happened to her, or why she was being hunted. I could tell she was holding back, trying to process everything in her own way. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something she could talk about right now. But I needed to know more. I had to understand who was after us and why. I knew it wasn't just about the man from the motel. He wasn't working alone. There was something bigger going on, and I had to get to the bottom of it before it was too late. One evening, as we sat in yet another small, dimly lit motel room, I decided to ask her. It had been days since we had talked about it, and I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I had to know. Lily. I began softly, watching her from across the room, where she was sitting near the window, looking out at the dark street. You don't have to tell me everything, but I need to understand what's going on. Who's after you? She didn't turn around right away. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her jacket as she stared out at the empty street. I knew she was thinking, calculating, deciding whether or not to open up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't ask for any of this, she said, her words quiet but full of pain. I didn't ask for any of it, but now it's all I've got. All we've got. I waited, not pressing her, letting her speak when she was ready. There's something my mother was involved in, something I didn't understand at the time. She kept it a secret from me, but now I know. She worked with some people. Dangerous people. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She wiped them away quickly, but I saw the sadness in her eyes. She was trying to get out of it, she continued. She wanted to leave. She wanted to protect me, but they wouldn't let her. They said if she tried to leave, they'd come after me. And they did. And now they're after you, too. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. It made sense now, why she had been so scared, why this man, whoever he was, had been chasing her. He wasn't just some thug. He was part of something bigger, something much more dangerous. And I had unknowingly stepped into the middle of it. I could feel the anger rising inside me. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about protecting her from people who didn't care about the damage they caused. You don't have to worry anymore, I said, standing up and walking over to her. I'm going to make sure they don't hurt you. We're going to figure this out. She looked up at me, her eyes still filled with that same fear, but there was a hint of hope there, too. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I just want to be safe. I just want to be with you. I sat down beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out. We'll make a plan. We're not running forever, Lily. We're going to take them down. All of them. She nodded slowly, the weight of what I said sinking in. But we can't stay here, I added. We have to keep moving, but we need to get the right people involved. People who can help us. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, I don't know who we can trust anymore. I do, I said, my voice steady. I've got a few contacts I trust. They can help us, but we have to get to them first. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to just roll over. They would come for us, and they would come hard. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I couldn't. Not when it came to protecting Lily. We're getting out of here tomorrow, I said, standing up and pacing the room. We're going to head to a town about 200 miles away. I've got a friend there who owes me a favor. He's got connections. He can help us figure out who's after you and how to stop them. I looked back at Lily. We've been running long enough. It's time to fight back. She met my gaze and nodded, the fear still there, but now there was determination in her eyes. I'm with you, she said, her voice firm. We'll take them down. I didn't know if we were ready for what was coming, but I knew one thing. We were in this together, and that meant we had a chance. I woke up the next morning to the sound of rain tapping gently against the motel window. It had been a restless night. Even in the dark, my mind had been racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. We couldn't keep running forever. We had to face whoever was behind this, and we needed help. I turned to Lily, who was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. She had that look in her eyes, the one that said she was holding it together, but I could tell she was still scared. I wasn't sure how much more she could handle, but I had to keep it together for both of us. I stood up and walked over to her. We're leaving today, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We're going to find the people who can help us. She nodded without saying anything. Her silence was deafening. I could tell she was trying to process everything that had happened, trying to figure out what the next move was. I knew she was scared. Hell, I was scared too. But we didn't have a choice. We had to keep going. I grabbed my jacket and put it on, then looked at Lily. Let's go. We can't stay here any longer. We packed up quickly, each of us lost in our thoughts as we gathered our things. I could hear the rain picking up outside, the world beyond the motel window a blur of gray. Once everything was packed, I walked out to the bike and started the engine, the familiar roar of the Harley-Davidson a small comfort in the chaos. Lily climbed on behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. I could feel her tension, her body stiff against mine, but she didn't say anything. We rode in silence, the rain stinging my face as we hit the road. The wind was cold, and the world around us was a blur of wet asphalt and trees. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. I had no idea what we were walking into, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop until Lily was safe. We drove for hours, crossing county lines and heading deeper into unfamiliar territory. I didn't trust anyone, not anymore. But I did trust the man I was going to meet. He owed me a favor, and I intended to collect. We reached the town just as the rain began to subside. It was a small place, the kind of town that felt like it hadn't changed in decades. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet, and the buildings looked old, like they had been standing for longer than they should have. I parked the bike in front of a nondescript building, a small bar, the kind that people came to when they needed to disappear. I took a deep breath before getting off the bike and looking at Lily. Stay close, I said, my voice low. We'll be in and out. I just need to talk to a friend. She nodded, her eyes wide, and I could see the fear in them again. But she didn't argue. She trusted me. We walked into the bar together, the sound of muffled conversation inside mixing with the faint hum of the jukebox. The air smelled of stale beer and smoke, and the low chatter from the few patrons inside faded as we entered. I scanned the room, my eyes falling on a man sitting at the far end of the bar. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. He looked up when he saw me, and I could see the recognition in his eyes. Long time no see, he said, his voice gruff but friendly. What brings you to Cedar Ridge? I walked over to him, Lily following close behind me. I need some help, I said, sitting down next to him. And I need it now. The man, who I knew as Jack, studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if assessing the situation. You're in trouble, huh? He asked, his tone turning serious. I nodded. It's not just me. It's her, I said, motioning toward Lily. She's being hunted, and we don't have much time. Jack didn't ask questions. He just nodded and signaled the bartender to bring us drinks. As we sat there, I explained everything. The threats, the man who had been after us, the fear that had been growing with every mile we put between ourselves and the past. Jack listened, his face unreadable, but I could see the gears turning in his head. You know you're not the only ones being hunted, Jack said after a moment of silence. There are others. People who have been caught in the same mess, trying to escape. Some have gotten away, some haven't. Who are they? I asked, my heart pounding. Jack leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's a network, he said. A group of people who've been running for years. Some of them are still out there, hiding in plain sight. But if you want to get to the people who are behind this, you're going to need help. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing what Jack had just said. This was bigger than I had thought. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about something much larger, something that had been going on for far longer than I realized. Jack gave me a look, one that said he had been through enough to know the risks. You're going to need more than just me to take them down, he said. You'll need the right people. And they're not easy to find. I nodded. I'll find them, I said, determination rising within me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her. Jack smiled, a hard, knowing smile. I know you will. He stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Just remember, this is bigger than you think. And once you're in, there's no turning back. I looked at Lily, who was still standing near the door, watching us. She was more than ready for this fight. And so was I. Whatever was coming next, we were ready. This time, we were going to take the fight to them. I could feel the weight of Jack's words hanging in the air long after he had walked away. This was bigger than anything I had ever imagined, and it wasn't going to be solved by just running or hiding anymore. The network Jack mentioned, the one that had been running from the same people who were after us, wasn't just a handful of scared people. It was a whole operation, one that had been going on long before I crossed paths with Lily. I sat back, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. I knew one thing for sure. We weren't just running anymore. We were in a fight for survival. I looked at Lily, who was still standing by the door, her face thoughtful, her arms wrapped tightly around her. She had heard everything Jack said. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the same way they were in mine. We had to make a decision. What do we do now? Lily asked, her voice soft but steady. We can't keep running forever. I nodded. I know. We need to find those people. The ones Jack mentioned. But we need to be smart about it. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building. It wasn't going to be easy. I could feel the pressure mounting. There were too many questions, too many unknowns. But what I didn't know was that I wasn't going to let anyone hurt Lily. I had to end this. We had to stop running, and we had to start fighting back. I turned to Jack, who was at the bar, talking to a man I didn't recognize. I knew he had connections, people who could help us. But I didn't trust anyone completely. Not anymore. I had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. After a few more minutes, Jack came back over to us, his face more serious now. I've got a lead, he said. I can get you in touch with someone who knows the people behind all this. But it's dangerous, and they won't be easy to find. My heart raced. We were getting closer. But closer meant more danger. How do we find them? I asked. Jack hesitated for a moment, glancing at Lily before answering. There's a safe house, about 2 hours from here. Also got her own secrets. I didn't have time to process all of this. I had to move, and I had to move fast. We didn't have the luxury of time. The longer we stayed in one place, the more chances we gave them to catch up to us. We leave now, I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. We can't waste any more time. Lily stood up, looking at me with a mixture of fear and determination. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? She asked. We can't keep hiding. I nodded. I'm sure. We can't hide forever. It's time to face this head on. We didn't say much after that. There was nothing left to say. We had made our choice. The bike roared to life as I kicked the engine into gear, the sound breaking the silence of the night. The road ahead stretched out in front of us, dark and uncertain, but for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were moving forward. And that was enough. We drove through the night. The wind in our faces, the world a blur around us. I didn't think about the danger. I didn't think about the people who were hunting us. I thought about Lily. I thought about getting her out of this alive. We reached the safe house just before dawn, a small, run-down house on the outskirts of a sleepy town. It looked abandoned, but I knew better than to trust appearances. I parked the bike and motioned for Lily to follow me. We made our way to the front door, and I knocked twice, quick and steady, the way we had agreed. A few seconds later, the door creaked open, and a woman stepped out. She was older than I had expected, probably in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. You're here for Sarah? She asked, her voice low and guarded. We need to talk, I said, glancing at Lily. The woman nodded, stepping aside to let us in. We don't have much time, she said, closing the door behind us. They'll be looking for you soon. I could see the tension in her face, but I didn't have time to ask questions. Where do we start? I asked. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You want answers? We start with the man you're running from. He's not the only one after you, but he's the key. Her words sent a chill through me. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next, but there was no turning back. We'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice firm. Sarah gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Good, because it's going to be a long road ahead. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew one thing. This was the beginning of the end. We weren't just running anymore. We were going to take the fight to them. I stood in the small, dimly lit room, listening to Sarah as she explained everything that had been hidden for so long. The pieces were finally starting to fit together. The man who had been chasing us wasn't just some lone thug. He was a part of a much bigger operation, a network of dangerous people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But now, we had something they didn't. We had the truth, and we had each other. The people behind all of this, Sarah said, her voice steady. They're well connected. They've been running things for years, pulling strings behind the scenes. Your mother knew too much. She was trying to expose them, and that's why they came after her. And now they're after you. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. I had suspected as much, but hearing it all laid out so plainly made it feel real. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure this didn't happen to anyone else. We have to take them down, I said, my voice firm with resolve. Sarah met my gaze. You're not the only one with a score to settle, she replied, her eyes hardening. There's a group of us who've been fighting back in the shadows. It's not going to be easy, but it's the only way. I looked over at Lily, who had been listening intently, her face still filled with uncertainty, but also a spark of determination. She was scared, but she was ready to fight. She had been through so much already, and she wasn't going to back down now. We'll do it, I said, looking back at Sarah. We'll join you. We'll take them down together. Sarah nodded. Good, because time is running out. They won't stop coming after you. They won't stop coming after all of us. But if we work together, we can bring them down. We can make them pay for what they've done. I felt a surge of anger rise inside me. The thought of all the people who had been hurt by these people, the lives they had destroyed, was enough to drive me forward. We couldn't let them win. Not now, not ever. When do we start? I asked, my voice low and determined. Sarah's eyes glinted with a mix of resolve and something else, something deeper. Now, she said simply. We start now. The plan was simple. We would infiltrate their network, gather the evidence we needed, and expose them for the criminals they were. It wouldn't be easy. We didn't have much time, and we didn't have the resources of an army behind us. But we had the will to fight, and that was all we needed. You ready for this? I asked Lily, looking at her one last time before we set out. She nodded, her eyes burning with the same fire I felt inside me. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Let's do this. We left the safe house and made our way to the first location Sarah had given us. It wasn't far, just a small office building tucked away on the outskirts of town. But the people inside that building were part of the network, and if we could get in, we could start unraveling their operations. As we approached the building, I felt a familiar knot of tension in my stomach. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. The plan was risky, but we had no choice. We couldn't afford to hesitate. We couldn't afford to wait any longer. Sarah led the way, her movements swift and purposeful. I stayed close behind, with Lily right beside me. We entered through the back entrance, moving quietly, staying out of sight. The building was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the air as we made our way through the hallways. We stopped outside an office door, and Sarah motioned for us to stay back. We need to get inside and gather everything we can, she whispered. Any information, any files, anything that ties them to the bigger operation. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. We were going to bring them down. The door creaked open, and we slipped inside, immediately getting to work. I searched through the drawers, finding files and documents that looked like they could be crucial. Sarah went straight to the computer, quickly hacking into the system. I've got access, she said quietly, her eyes scanning the screen. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're getting there. As Sarah worked, I kept my eyes on the door, listening for any sounds that might signal someone coming. We couldn't afford to get caught now. The door to the office suddenly opened, and I froze. My heart stopped for a moment as I looked at the figure standing in the doorway. It was one of them, the men we had been running from. He didn't see us yet, but I knew that wouldn't last long. We have to go, I whispered urgently to Lily. But before we could move, the man stepped inside, his eyes immediately landing on us. I knew you'd show up, he said, a cold smile spreading across his face. And now it's too late. Without thinking, I grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her toward the window, knowing we had only one chance to escape. I looked back at Sarah, who was already standing, ready to move. Let's go, I shouted, and together, we ran toward the back of the building, knowing that the fight had just begun.